as targeted as the discussion as possible today. So to give some concrete examples of how to move that course online and where, what resources we have to help you do that. So a little bit of background about myself. So I was a postdoctoral fellow at the National Institutes of Health, where I studied virus assembly and virus interaction with the host, not a coronavirus, rather something called a rotavirus. It's a gastrointestinal virus of children, or typically children. And what better way to talk about viruses and bring that to the public than to dress up like a virus when speaking to children. So this is me doing a little event at the Smithsonian. I was then an associate professor at Montgomery College here in suburban Maryland, where I taught biology, microbiology, biotech classes. I'm a big believer in getting students involved in the process, having a little fun, being engaging. And while I was there, I taught blended courses, online courses, both to majors and non-majors, mostly to non-majors. But what I hope to do today is to bring some of that experience. While I was there and at a different school, I completed training in not only how to teach online, but also participated in training other instructors on how to bring active learning and technology to their classroom. I joined LabArchives a little more than a year ago to be able to bring that experience, but also to help build what you're going to look at today, which is this library of digital content. So I want to try to bring everything that we have together to cover some top tips. So I'm going to be moving back and forth between what do I see as how to move things quickly online, but also how can we tether that with some concrete examples of what we have. So let's just start with, these are my big overarching tips for the day, and I'm going to give you some examples. So first, I like to, I'm one of those people who thinks about a topic, gets excited about what to do in the classroom, and then just jumps right into what are we going to do. But honestly, thinking about that goal, what are we trying to get our students to do? That's what we should be doing as educators and course designers always. And in a moment of panic right now, it's really easy to get wrapped up into what do we have to do in the next minute. So I want to start with thinking about what's the goal? What are we trying to get our students to do, even if we have to do it in a different way? I'm going to talk a little bit about how do we achieve that goal by learning by building. So maybe we can't do the exact same lab, but we can try to replace that with something else where they are the builders, where they are putting things together. How do we incorporate a little fun into this, especially if we can bring some levity and bring down some anxiety on everybody's side, both the student and the instructor? And then how do we bring some repetition into this? We know that's important in the face-to-face classroom. That's even more important in the distance learning situation. Having knowing what to anticipate, especially when you can't, look over a student's shoulder is really important. So let's get started with what's the goal. And to do that, and since I'm going to bounce between talking about these 4 topics and showing you examples in our platform, I want to give you a little overview of what our platform is as I go with those examples. So LabBuilder is I'm going to jump into the platform now. LabBuilder is oh, and I see that there's a question. Yeah, as you have questions, throw them in the Q&A. Jeremy is going to field some of those questions. I'll pause for questions when we time to time. So I do want to make sure I address questions and get those taken care of, because this is to me, it's important that we have tangible things to take home today. Okay, so what you're looking at is our LabArchives platform. You're looking at the LabBuilder notebook. So I'm just going to give you a lay of the land before we jump into that first point. So LabArchives is set up as a series of folders and subfolders with the pages. Really, the action happens in the center of the page. So if you think about maybe your learning management system or other digital organization platforms, really the meat of the content, the things you're giving out to your students, or the places you organize happen here. Instructions you might give to them, that would all live in that middle of this page. The organization happens on the left-hand side. I'm going to draw your attention here to where it says Notebooks 2. Rosalind Franklin is the owner of who's logged in. She has 2 notebooks. So she has access to LabBuilder, so she can get into this library of content, she can see what's in there, peruse, but she also has a notebook that she can add her own content to, she can add some of this content to, and we'll get to how that works. But for right now, I just want you to know that there's 2 notebooks on that shelf. So you can think of it like 2 digital notebooks. Now, the other part I want to bring your attention to is the top. You have the ability to search any notebook, all notebooks, one notebook, by searching keyword. So let's say you're interested in analytical chemistry or microbiology. You can use this toolbar at the top and search either a simple word search or a more complex search. So it's a couple different ways to get started. So now that we have sort of the lay of the land, the way I've structured this library, I wanted to create something that made it easy for instructors to get started, made it relatively easy to find things, especially since my lab, your lab, digital versus distance versus face-to-face are all a little different. I wanted a way for instructors to be able to find what they're looking for, but also customize. So I divided content into roughly 4 different buckets, being a lab, a protocol, a course pack, or a textbook. I'm really going to focus today on labs, and a lab has a full instructional unit. Think of it as has a background section. It has some assignments, so a pre-lab and a post-lab, and then it has the actual procedure. That could be a procedure they do completely online. Maybe there's a simulation, or maybe that's a face-to-face. So they show up in lab, they pour beaker, and do something. Every one of these buckets or types of content follow a similar organization pattern, meaning they're subdivided into folders by discipline, and then further divided by subdiscipline. So I can have biochemistry separate from genetics. If I come here to microbiology, each one of these folders is a specific lab. And so they all follow a same pattern. And for this first lab that I'm going to show you, this is a nice example of your goal. So in microbiology, one of the classic practical exams is identification of an unknown. So the idea here, and this is a lab I wrote with a former colleague of mine, we just published this on Friday, but this is a way essentially for students to be able to identify an organism they don't know using a series of tests. You can do this, I've seen this often in chemistry courses, be it Gen Chem, maybe analytical chemistry, maybe an organic chemistry class. So this just happens to be the biology version of that. So what we did when we designed this lab is basically the goal was students have to wrangle with data. They have to interpret data. They have to come up with hypotheses. So if they can't be in the lab, how can we get to that same learning objectives as here in a virtual state? What we did is we turned this around and created a pre-lab assignment where students were given the results. So they're given the data, and I've shown you the picture here. I'm going to open that in a new tab. The students have to work through this real data. They have to interpret it. They have to start coming up with a plan for how they're going to solve this unknown problem. So what is their step 1 for their test, step 2 for the test? So they're essentially going through the process of that practical exam of finding the unknown. They're building out their own dichotomous keys. I'm going to scroll down. So they're doing almost everything they would have done in the face-to-face class. We're providing them the data. The thing that is absent is the physical inoculation of plates or tubes, or that's the parts that's missing. But if our goal was to get them to do critical thinking, logical thinking, step by step by step, we're achieving that goal. Just a little different. I've heard a lot of feedback from instructors in the last week. They're doing things similar, especially if they still have a little bit of access to their laboratories. Maybe they have old data for previous semesters. You can, again, sort of flip this on its head. Provide the data, let the students interpret, let the students analyze, make them predict what will happen. So if I come back here to procedure, the students are given the unknown. there's sort of a back and forth between the student and the instructor. The student requests the data, the instructor puts the data in the student's notebook, they analyze, and they go through this process of iteration. So that gets, again, to the similar goal of what we're trying to do. There's lots of different things out there where students, you can still have them collecting data. So there's one called BudBurst, which is a citizen science project where basically anybody can be collecting data. You could have your students record this data in their digital notebook, which is part of the Lab Archives platform. And so again, they're the ones actively engaged, and you can still reach that goal of having them be making hypothesis involved in the process. So this is just one example of what you could do or modify of your current instruction to get to that same objective. And I'm just gonna point out, I found this last night, just perusing around, that I really like this idea of rules of two. So keeping things simple as you go remote. So what are those things you really wanna accomplish? Yes, we all have the things we love to teach, but if we take a step back and say, what is it that we really want to accomplish right now? What can we do? What is really essential for our students to know by the end of this semester? What can they walk away with and do it well? So maybe we have to roll back just a few of those learning objectives and roll some things back and try to dig deeper rather than being quite as broad. So that next step is, let's learn by building. So especially now that you have a situation where we can create our classroom in just a little different way, we can put some of that ownership on the student for them to be the guide of their learning experience. So let them build something, have them design the hypothesis and the experiment. But it's also possible, an example I've used in my classroom, a distance learning classroom, is get them to either build the project, have them do the report, or an example from a virtual distance class I taught for non-majors virology, I had them build virus models. So this is actually a coronavirus. It was actually the MERS virus and not SARS-2. But you can see I had them, this is the genome, this is the spike proteins, this is the envelope. So it was a way to get students to demonstrate. And I'm going to bring up the actual example. It was a way to get my students to be able to think about, what is it that they're trying to do? I want them to understand what are the parts of the virus. I was very clear for them, what exactly, when they're building a model, what is it that they have to show me? But I gave them some creativity. I let them have some fun with that. In addition to having turned in that model for this project, they had to write up a summary. So there was multiple pieces to this. And I don't have time to go into detail, but we incorporated this model building as part of some online discussion. It became part of their final exam. So people were evaluating each other's projects. And so it was a nice way to build a theme throughout the whole semester. But what was nice about it as well is it gave me some benchmarks. So they were building, I checked in with them. There was ways to assess their learning in small little chunks along the way, but it also gave them some ownership. It's amazing what students like and how engaged they can get when they can show off what they did and what they know and when they become the expert. Somebody made a comment in a previous webinar that, maybe arts and crafts isn't where we want our students to go. The sky's the limit now. There's all kinds of digital simulations. If you want to get creative and have your students, maybe there's online modeling, all sorts of ways to build something. By all means, find what works for you. So one example is you can have students model things by drawing it out. I have in a lab that I'm going to show you here for a non-majors genetics course. So this is modeling basically Mendelian genetics. They can model with M&Ms, Skittles. So they could do that in a lot of different ways. It doesn't have there are so many different ways to do the same thing. We have a mitosis lab where they can model by drawing. They could do it with gummy worms. So there's no one way to have students model, but if you put it into their hands and put the weight on their shoulders, especially in an online situation, it can be a great way to know that they're engaging in the learning, and it can bring in an element of fun, which is actually the next thing I wanted to talk about. So I'm going to come to show you, if we go into physical sciences, a general chemistry lab. We have a lab called Limiting Reactants with Balancing Equations. This is actually a lab that was written by one of our lab archives instructors. And it's a lab that students could do at home. And what they need is baking soda, a balance. So baking soda if they have it at home. So it's a way for students to be able to look at, especially in that general chemistry course and intro course, to be doing things that are hands-on. They could do it at home, things that they have in their store, or hopefully in their cupboard, or they could get from a store. But it's something that they could tangibly do. But something that makes this fun, and I have a picture somewhere, I believe it's in the introduction, is they're actually engaged in it, right? They're doing it. And one way to know that the students are doing it, they're involved in the process, that they can show off that they did it, is take a selfie. So not only are they recording their data, they're recording they did it, but they're involved in the process. So get them to have as much involvement in the process as possible. Maybe they record themselves doing it. Maybe they make some sort of video of it. So anything you can think of to get them to have fun with it and be creative with it, go for it. So then the last thing I would point out before I take some questions is the repetition part. What can help you and what can help your students, especially as things start changing back and forth, we get new information day in and day out, is to find a pattern that works for everybody. Even if you have to have some flexibility in that pattern, find something that works so that they know what to expect, you know what to expect, and you're not repeating yourself. So what do I mean? So here's an example of my syllabus from that non-majors virology class. It was a blended course, meaning that we showed up to campus one day per week. Everything else was distance. So it was I set it up so that I knew we had midweek check-ins. So they knew exactly what they needed to do at the beginning of every week. They knew that in the middle of the week, they had something they had to turn in. I set it up because I knew that that final beginning of the week assignment was always due on Sunday night, because I had Monday mornings with no meetings. It was when I was fresh and my brain was ready to grade and answer questions. So students always knew that everything cumulative for the week before was always due Sunday night. So if they wanted to procrastinate, well, then that was on them. But they knew that that was the pattern. They knew to anticipate that. It also worked for my schedule. I knew that I could give them my brain power and check, right, that I was ready then to go through that list of assignments. There was always a midweek check-in, so they had to, say, turn in part of an assignment, part of a discussion board by Wednesday. That way, that was keeping everybody on track. You couldn't get too far behind. It also ensured that I was checking in daily or every other day to make sure that student A, B, and C were really on track. And if I saw that somebody really was kind of going astray, I could give them a little bit of a nudge. Because I don't know about you, even in a face-to-face class, you're constantly sending emails, announcements, and it feels like it's going in a black hole. I don't know if people are reading. I don't know if they're answering. It's hard to know what's being sent out there. So if they sort of have a pattern, anticipation, that can help you know that for the most part, your information is getting across. Another thing to say with this repetition, and and making this quick shift on over, is to have a repetition for how you organize it in your notebook, or how you decide to organize it. So I'm going to come back to this folder with biological, come into GenBio. So one way to go about getting into that pattern is to, for example, always on an introduction page, or always on a, this is the first week of the lab or first page of something, to always have a checklist. We are going to do X, Y, and Z this week. This is why we're going to do X, Y, and Z this week. And just have it, you can put it as a grid, find some sort of pattern, easy organization for you, but also list it out for the students. We are going to do this, this, and this week. And it just puts in their face, this is what we're trying to achieve. And it helps them know, I've done, I did my work, and I've gone through everything, and it brings down that anxiety. But you can repeat yourself. Even if you cut and paste, literally copy the text and paste it again, I'd put it again at the post-lab assignment or somewhere later on in that folder structure, so that they can go back and say, okay, yes, I completed this. Yes, I completed that. Yes, I completed that. It can save you some angst later on when people are saying what was due, what wasn't due. Something else I found that's really helpful is to have multiple modes of media. We skim anymore. We don't really read. So having different ways to give information to students. So maybe a short little video, short recording, text, all of that can help to make sure your message is getting through. Now, I don't want to overwhelm people and make you think like you have to create all of your own videos, spend hours and hours of editing. I don't like being on video. When I first flipped all my lectures and tried to create a different sort of situation for my micro course, I never turned the camera on, but students really like that. They don't need it to be perfect. They just want to see you and know that you're a real person. So having short, less than 10-minute videos, little snippets of this is what we're going to do, whether it's instructions or instructional, giving them the background versus just this is what we're going to do, they will really appreciate that. The other fun, this is just a side note. I had a cat fight that happened in the background of one of my videos. I was frustrated, didn't edit it out. I got the most props from students. They thought it was the funniest thing. So they really are flexible. They want to see that you're trying. They're in this with you. And so take that piece of knowledge with you as you go through making these big drastic changes. I think that's a good stopping point to take some questions. Before I move on to, how would you customize? How would we bring this into a class, and how could we build a course off of it?
We have one from Lisa. Is there a quick way to tell which materials already in lab archives are written with at-home online settings in mind?
So what I have done, you come to the details page. I always outline the topic words, put an instruction type. I've tried to always indicate if something is appropriate for online. I think many of our topics, many of this instructional material could be adapted for online, meaning maybe you change it so that you provide them some data or ask them to make the data or find the data. But where possible, I've always indicated that something, if it's appropriate for online or distance. So another way to go about that is to use this search bar and type for online. And maybe your discipline. So if you're looking for mitosis online, you could find it that way. Another question?
Yes, Werner was mentioned in the osmosis folder. How will you incorporate software platforms such as Veneer?
Okay, great question. So Veneer is one of our partners. We have a lot of their labs inside of our platform. They are offering, and we'll be putting out more sample data and simulations that could be for their instructors. So very similar to what we had designed for that microbiology unknown, they're doing something similar. So I'm going to be as I can, pulling some of those data sets and actually putting them into LabBuilder. But for now, all of their data sets that they've shared out are on their website. You can take that data and incorporate anywhere that they've actually, I try not to make you dizzy. Anywhere that you see veneer, if they have their data set up, feel free to pull that in and customize it so it fit. But we are trying to bring those two together.
And I shared that link with the group via chat.
Thank you.
Can instructors share their lab content with other instructors either through private access or public access?
We, meaning through LabBuilder or Lab Archives?
Yes.
Yes. So that is somewhere we absolutely want to go. We want to be able to make this resource a way for instructors to share. So if you have something you would like to share, that you have a content that you would like to share with us and share with the broader public, contact me. So nstringer@labarchives.com, and I can work to get that put into LabBuilder. But that's exactly where I want this project to go. I see this as instructors. When I started teaching, I would not have known where to start if amazing teachers hadn't provided me with somewhere to begin. And so this is exactly what I want this resource to be, is instructors sharing what works for them so that that can grow beyond. So absolutely, reach out to me and we can get that process started. Thank you.
What sources are there for working with animal anatomy?
So right now, I'm going to go into the anatomy and physiology folder. We have more physiology labs than anatomy labs. I'm working to adapt some of our anatomy labs so that it would be more appropriate for online instruction. I don't have a ton to offer you right now. What I would recommend is to double check to see if your institution has a subscription to something called Primal Pictures. So that can be a nice way for students to work. I haven't worked with it directly myself, but it's a nice way for students to have to interact with the images. They have a nice set and repository of anatomy images. So I see that next question from Vanessa is about, do we have anything for plant biology and diversity, AKA botany? I'm sorry, Vanessa, that is a place that we're working on, but we just don't have yet. So Lab Archives is free for new courses until July 31st. So access for you and the students is absolutely free. We want to make sure that we are supporting all of our instructors as they make this switch, and students, so that they don't have an added cost.
And Vanessa, to add to your question, if you have botany content that you use within your lab and you have access to that, you can add that to Lab Archives and build your course.
Absolutely. So the other question I see is, can you link it to other online simulations? Absolutely. So I can show you in a minute how to link using a URL, but I see Lab Archives really as it's an organization. So you are setting your platform, you're setting up your learning environment. So if you want to, you're giving that scaffold to your student. So if you want to have them record the data in Lab Archives and show you what they did in that simulation, say at SymBio, that's the place for them to be interacting and recording that. But you can always send them out somewhere else. So if you want them to go out to SymBio, do that simulation, but come back to Lab Archives to record the data, or talk about what they learned, formulate this hypothesis ahead of time, and then go out to SymBio, by all means. And let's make sure that I show you how to do that URL when I show you how to edit the notebook in just a minute. So then I saw, I'm going to answer, I see a biochemistry DNA electrophoresis question. So I'm going to come here into, it's actually under molecular biology. We have a couple of labs that use an integration with SnapGene. It's a molecular biology software so one is so you can save directly to lab archives from this software. We have a partnership with SnapGene. So students would be able to use the full version of SnapGene to be able to run basically simulations of how DNA would run out on a gel. So I said that in a convoluted way. Essentially, via the SnapGene software, students can do all sorts of things like in silico cloning, predict PCR primers, do predictive restriction enzyme digest. So all sorts of things that they could simulate in real software. I've written some labs around, say, creating oligos. What would happen in a virtual situation if you digest different plasmids in different ways. So I wrote those labs around using SnapGene. You can get SnapGene for free for 30 days, or you can go through their educational platform access where you can get it for free as well. So I hope that answers some of that question. Okay. So I think this is a good time to switch over to how do we actually, so how would you actually bring that into your course? So how can we build this out and build something that students, that you can use and students can use? As Jeremy mentioned, there's a couple different, you're not restricted to just using our content. So we've provided LabBuilder as a way to get started. So being able to find what you might want to use, you can search a couple different ways. But to be able to use it, we want you to be, we're going to have you move it over to a different notebook so you can customize it there. From there, you can add in all of your own, maybe some of your own content, things you found from other places, and then teach from that. So let's go look at that other notebook. I'm going to show you how to move something over, how to edit, and what it looks like to create a course. So let's go look at that other notebook. So if you create a brand new account, so anybody not already a LabArchives user, when you create a brand new account, you're essentially it's gonna look like this. You'll have two notebooks. One will be LabBuilder and one will be this My Course notebook that has nothing in it. So if we go back to LabBuilder, let's go find a lab. I go into math because everybody needs some math. And you can select a whole page, a whole folder, whatever seems of interest to you, to be able to move something over. So to take it to some place that you can customize, right click to that folder, and you're gonna copy to another notebook. So essentially that moves that folder else to another place so that you can edit. I only have one other notebook, so I'm gonna ask it to start the copy. Come over to My Course notebook, and that whole folder copied over. Again, it has that 5-page format where we have the background, we have an introduction for things, and there's a procedure. I've made sure that for all of the pre-lab, for all of these that we followed best practices for accessibility. This is really important online. This is always important, but this can be incredibly important online as well. If you don't necessarily know the technology your students have, what their needs are. So to show you what I'm talking about, you're looking at a rich text entry. You have a little pencil, meaning that you have the ability to edit. So you'll see here, I have heading 2. So this means that the screen readers can go through and appropriately go down the page and read as it needs to read if somebody needs assisted technology. If you want to, for example, change my instructions, you don't like it, you want to add more, you want to take out, you now have the ability to say delete. You could also have the ability, we were talking about linking to other resources. You can highlight text. You have the ability over here to link to a URL. So you can paste whatever you would like in there. And this is just a personal preference for me, especially when I'm organizing a class, keeping things, keeping students organized. I like to always have a tab open and a link always open in a new tab. It's very nitpicky, but it helps keep everybody organized. So that's one way to be able to have Lab Archives be the hub and link out to maybe some of those other simulations. So I know that HHMI has some great contents. If you're interested in case studies, there's the Buffalo National Case Study through University of Buffalo. So there's lots of different places where you could use Lab Archives as the hub, but be bringing in these fabulous resources from elsewhere. So we've seen how to edit. You can insert pictures, videos, all sorts of different content inside of this text entry. You also have the ability to attach pictures directly to the page, and so do the students. So going back to that idea of a selfie or having students actually attach their own data, it's really just one click to be able to have students attach, say, an image, and they could attach that data or image directly to a page. So you could go right there and save to page. You also have a number of options up here at the top. We integrate with Microsoft Office Online. So there are some, if you don't want students to have to work outside of the notebook and have to work outside with another formatting platform, they can do everything inside here. So I think that answered the question on how to add content if it's your own, how to link out to other content, and how to edit. So once you've created what you want, don't feel like you have to create everything the first day. So maybe start with Lab 1, Week 1, Day 1. You can always update because you as the instructor are at the top of the pyramid. And I'm gonna come back here to give you an idea of how the notebook student relationship is set up before I show you what a course looks like. So really the way this Lab Archives, the classroom side of things, education side of things works is you as the instructor are going to set up a notebook like we were just looking at. You organize it how you see fit. What do you want your students to learn? How do you want them to work in it? Maybe set up that pattern of instructions. And you're going to create a course based on that notebook. As soon as you create a course, you're essentially giving your students a reflection of your notebook. You're the top of the pyramid, so they see exactly, you're guiding what they see. You can always pop into their notebook, so you can enter their notebook, see what they're doing. You can even edit their notebook. You can add data to their notebook. But think about it in this regard. As soon as you open that course, start that course, everybody's notebook looks identical. You shared a reflection of yours to everybody in the class. So student A, B, and C, everybody's notebook looks the same. By the end of the semester, everybody's notebook will be different because student A's data is different than B's, different than C's. Their answers are different. But you can always be sending new information out to the entire course. So if you want to change a typo, add new information, change directions, you have that ability because you're at the top. I'm going to show you what that looks like with our how to set up a course, but I just want you to get the idea of you're creating a course based off of a notebook. So you'll create a notebook, what we were looking at before, put whatever content you want in it, mix and match ours and yours, however you want to structure that, but you give that course a title. To get students invited or into your course, we're essentially going to send them a URL link. They click on the link, it asks them to create an account. As soon as they have an account, they're plopped into your course notebook. So let's come back to Lab Archives. We can see that this is my course notebook. That's the first folder I've gotten set up for my first online class, my first session. When I draw your attention up here, this is what we call our course manager. That's a chalkboard and an instructor. If I click on that, it's going to open up a new tab. This is my only course so far. I already went through the process of creating a course. We have webinars, training webinars on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays that go through in great detail. I'm blowing through this fast, but they go through how to create a course, how to do the entry types, how to create assignments. But just in the interest of time, I already created this course to show you what it looks like. So the course has a title, and it's based off of my course notebook. So this notebook you were looking at before. You can create sections if you want. So let's say you want one notebook, you teach the same class, but you have a Monday, Wednesday section and a Tuesday, Thursday section. You can divide that up. If you want to put in a teaching assistant is really up to you to define. They have a few different user role rights than an instructor. So maybe that's your co-instructor or somebody who's helping you out with the course. It's not formally a TA. There's a couple different ways to get students signed up for the course. You can either copy paste this URL, send that out in an email, post that in your learning management system, and they just click on the URL and it invites them into the course. Or you can add them individually. So you can use this, if I draw your attention here, this add to students. We can add students individually. So we could add, say, another student to my class. Let's say she didn't respond to the email link. We could add her individually to make sure that she really did get added. So there's a couple different ways to make sure students get added to the course. You have a grade book, meaning we didn't go through how to set up assignments. They do that in those training webinars on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. You have the ability in this course notebook. I scroll all the way to the top. We have an additional entry type, meaning you can give a flag to your student that, hey, you actually have an assignment. We have lots of different ways to set up assignments. An assignment can mean whatever an assignment is to you, but this is a way to give a flag to the student. Hey, turn this in. It's also a flag for you to go back and grade. And so that's another way to help get things online, is to be able to do all that work inside of the Lab Archives system. Is you could use all of our course management tools, some of them, whatever works as you're transitioning transitioning online. So just to come back and do a little bit of a summary. I'm gonna come here, go back to LabBuilder, and I abandon my edits. This idea of the platform, mix and match and use it in any different way you really see fit for your classroom. So we're thinking about our goals in this last half of the semester for most of us. What do you really want them to walk away with? Maybe it's getting them to interact, look at data that's coming out. Maybe depending on your course, your focus could be taking in current data and processing COVID data. I saw some really interesting graphs and data on how CO2 emissions are dramatically dropping because we're not commuting. So maybe that is how you structure your course. Maybe taking some of these labs, moving it into a notebook where you adapt the content to fit an online session or situation works for you. Maybe, like Jeremy mentioned, bring in your own content, and we can help you with that process of uploading and formatting content. So there's all sorts of different ways to set that up. And in the end, Lab Archives was designed as an electronic notebook. So it's a way to record data, interact with data. You're getting your students to really wrangle and with an authentic platform of what it is to predict, inquire, and have that experience. So use it as a way to, even if you can't see them face to face, to get them to really to be the builders and the leaders of their own learning experience. So that's, for me, I really think for getting yourself going, try to, figure out what it is you really want to achieve in this rest of the semester. Have them be, get them really involved in that process, your students, I mean. Have some fun with it. As much as you can check in with them, as much as they have to check in with you, as much levity as you can bring to the situation as possible. And then that repetition, say it again, and then say it again. It cannot, that value and that repetition, it really, really will pay off. So I put up here a link. We have our webinars. We've added a whole bunch more training webinars because a lot of instructors are moving. We want to make sure we can support that. And to get signed up, if you don't already have an account, go to mynotebook.labarchives.com. Be sure to select instructor so that LabBuilder notebook shows up for you. If it doesn't show up for you, reach out to our support team and we'll make sure that that gets turned on for you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that you've taken some time out of your day. I'm going to stick around and answer more questions. Best of luck to everybody. I know this is a ever-changing moment. It's stressful for everybody. My heart goes out to you. This must be very stressful, and we're here to do what we can. So, questions?
I can answer the question concerning LMS. We currently have integrations with Blackboard, Canvas, and Moodle. There's been a lot of requests for Brightspace. You can incorporate Brightspace, but again, it's you're sending out the link for the notebook to your class, to your students through your LMS, and then you're doing all your grading and stuff within LabArchives. But then you can import those grades back from LabArchives back into your LMS. So that's for Brightspace. For Moodle, Canvas, and Blackboard, there's direct integrations. They're working on LabArchives within the LMS.
Precisely.
And more detail can be provided at that Monday, Wednesday, Friday course manager webinar that takes place. All these links will be shared with everyone here, as well as a link to the video of this session, and it'll go out in about 2 hours after this session concludes.
Any final questions from anybody? So the cost, so after July 31st, the typical cost, we have a couple different types of costs, but typically it's $20 per student, per course, per semester. If your institution's interested in an institutional license, we have different pricing structures for that, but just at its basis, $20 per student per semester. And that gets them, you as the instructor have access to all that LabArchives content or LabBuilder content. We didn't get into textbooks, but we have there's a number of OpenStax textbooks on our platform. So there's a whole host of things that they have access to. But for any new course, we're offering free access through July 31st. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Best of luck with the transition. I hope this is helpful. Please reach out if you have thoughts, feedback, anything. I'm always open to chat and here to help. Okay, have a great day.